The smell of hickory smoke still clung to the breeze when Tom Carson found the violation notice taped to his old backyard smoker. The paper was laminated, weather-resistant, printed in a font that tried too hard to sound official. Jack stood just beyond the steps, a travel bag still slung over one shoulder, watching as his father peeled it off without a word. The way Tom's fingers moved, slow, deliberate, reminded Jack of how he used to handle hot metal back in the garage, not afraid, just precise. He stepped down to meet his father near the grill. The smoker itself was an old barrel style, rusted on the edges but seasoned from decades of use. Jack remembered it clearly, summer cookouts with his mom, Ellen, flipping burgers while his dad smoked brisket slow and proud. Permission was never a question back then. Tom handed him the notice. Violation of Section 3, Smoke Dispersion Ordinance. Fine of up to $200 per occurrence. Smoke dispersion. Jack read aloud, his brow arching. You've got 2 neighbors and a squirrel back here. Tom gave a dry grunt and folded the notice in half. The motion seemed to take more energy than it should. Jack looked around. The yard was the same as ever, well trimmed, flag gently fluttering off the carport, iced tea sweating on a side table near the porch swing. From the corner of the fence, a figure approached with stiff posture and polished intent. Beverly Krause, head of the HOA, made her entrance with a clipboard in hand and that trademark smile that never reached her eyes. Afternoon, Mr. Carson. Mr. Carson Jr. She nodded, teeth too bright. Just making sure you received the notice. We had a couple of concerned calls. Jack stayed quiet, but Tom didn't miss a beat. No smoke today. It's more about patterns, Beverly replied, as if explaining to a child. Grilling without prior approval can create expectations that are hard to manage. She scribbled something on her pad without looking up. We're working to maintain a harmonious atmosphere in Red Oak Hills. Jack opened his mouth, then closed it. Tom just nodded once and turned back toward the house. They ate inside. Dinner was leftover meatloaf, reheated unevenly in the microwave, served with pale green beans and a few tomato slices on paper plates. Jack poured sweet tea from the fridge, too cold to enjoy but better than tap. The window was cracked open, letting in birdsong and the hum of a neighbor's lawn trimmer. She's always been like that? Jack asked. Tom didn't answer right away. He focused on his plate, cut a bite that was mostly crust, and chewed with a patience born of habit. She used to organize flower sales, he finally said. Back before the HOA got ideas. Later that evening, Jack helped his father clean the kitchen. They rinsed the plates in silence, the air still faintly carrying the scent of smoke from earlier that afternoon. Just as Tom settled into his recliner and tuned the radio to the AM station, some low croon about lost trucks and long nights, a soft knock at the door interrupted the quiet. Jack opened it to find a folded HOA newsletter on the porch mat. No envelope. Just bold lettering across the top, backyard cooking moratorium in effect, effective immediately. Jack read it twice before handing it to his father. Can they even do this? He asked. Tom skimmed it, then set it on the armrest. He looked not frustrated, but distant, as if measuring something behind his own eyes. Jack watched him for a moment and noticed his gaze drift toward the mantel. There, next to a small ceramic eagle and a folded flag in a display case, was a photo of Ellen in her apron, standing by the grill with a metal spatula in hand. The caption stitched into the apron's front read, "Born to Smoke." The fan hummed gently from the corner, spreading a little warmth into the room that the tea had failed to replace. Jack eased into the couch. They're going to keep pushing, he said. Tom said nothing. A long minute passed. The only sound was the soft click of the old wall clock, ticking off time like a patient sentinel. Then Tom picked up the newsletter again, eyes narrowing just slightly. How hard would it be, he asked slowly, to find who owns the picnic field? Jack, caught off guard, says, "You thinking of filing a complaint?" Tom replies, "Something more permanent." Civic Green Field looked as innocent as any community park, except Tom remembered when it didn't belong to the HOA. He stood just beyond the cracked sidewalk, both heels sinking slightly into the soft edge of the grass. The field stretched long and clean before him, framed by a row of ornamental crabapples and a tired chain-link fence. Children's laughter echoed faintly from a neighboring yard, but this space sat still. Quiet, almost reverent. Jack came up beside him, eyes narrowed beneath the brim of his cap. "It looks smaller than I remember," he said. Tom didn't answer. Instead, he pointed toward the far corner where a crooked wooden post leaned slightly inward. "This used to be open for anyone, no permits, no sign-ups, just lawn chairs and ribs." A faded banner fluttered from a temporary frame near the picnic pavilion, HOA Summer Social, hosted by Beverly Krause. Her name, again, writ bold and centered as though the wind itself needed reminding. The font was cheerful. The ownership, assumed. Jack followed Tom's line of sight, then turned to scan the rest of the space. "You sure it's not still public?" Tom didn't blink. "Used to be town land. Then it was neglected. HOA started putting up signs and holding events. Nobody stopped them." They walked the perimeter slowly, taking in every detail: muddy tire ruts by the edge, stacked folding chairs under a tarp, a laminated event calendar zip-tied to the fence. By the far end, a riding mower sat half-covered, grass still clinging to the blade. Back in the truck, Tom started the engine without a word. Jack didn't ask where they were headed. The town archive shared a building with the water department and an old dentist office long since abandoned. Inside, the air smelled faintly of paper and floor wax. The receptionist pointed them toward the records room, where Frank Delgado was hunched over a microfiche machine, squinting like it owed him money. "Tom Carson," he said without turning. "Thought you only showed up for fishing licenses and property tax renewals." Tom gave a small nod. "Need to know who owns Civic Green." Frank turned then, wiping his hands on a rag that looked older than either of them. "You'd be surprised. HOA used to have a temp hold on it, back when they managed cleanup projects. Thing is, they let it lapse. Taxes fell behind. County pulled the rug out 3 months ago. It's up for silent auction." Jack looked over. "When's the bid deadline?" "Tuesday," Frank said. "End of business." Tom didn't smile, but his fingers tapped once against the edge of the desk. "Who'd I talk to about setting up an LLC?" Frank's eyebrows lifted. "Depends. You want it public or quiet?" "Quiet," Tom said. "For now." They thanked him and stepped back into the light. The morning had tilted toward noon, sun warming the pavement, the town slowly waking into a Sunday kind of rhythm. Couples strolled past with canvas bags full of beets and early peaches from the weekend market. A church bell rang somewhere in the distance, not urgent, just steady. Lou's Diner sat at the corner of Main and Birch, its windows smudged from decades of weather and welcome. Inside, a table near the back held a ceramic pig-shaped tip jar with a sign, "Keep us oinkin'." The waitress didn't ask for their order, she brought black coffee and 2 plates of hash browns before they'd settled in. Tom stirred sugar into his mug. "I remember when Ellen hosted that first July cookout down at Civic. She made 4 pies. People came from 3 counties." Jack smiled, eyes distant. "I was 10. Got stung by a bee and still went back for watermelon." The door opened with a soft chime, but Tom didn't turn. Across the room, Nancy Bell entered with her briefcase and a tired but alert look. She spotted them, approached without hurry. "Tom," she said. "Heard you might be asking questions." "I want to place a bid on the field," he said. Quietly. "Through a holding name if possible." Nancy Saturday, technically, HOA never had permanent title. They just acted like it. County seized it in March, unpaid maintenance taxes. "I can file a sealed bid under an LLC. You've got until end of day Tuesday." Jack glanced between them. "Any chance Beverly's already in the running?" Nancy opened her briefcase, pulled out a file. "If she is, it's not official yet. I've seen no legal filings from the HOA. But I wouldn't wait." She handed Tom a sheet with bidding instructions. He folded it once, placed it in his shirt pocket like it was a mechanic's invoice. Nancy nods. If we win that bid, you'll own the place they've been patrolling like royalty. Tom simply sips his coffee and says, then I'd better start drawing up plans. At sunrise on May 24th, Tom's pickup rumbled onto Civic Green Field, with bricks, steel grates, and a fresh set of tools in the back. The dew still clung to the grass, not yet burned off by the morning sun. His tires made soft tracks in the field, and the birdsong hadn't yet been interrupted by lawnmowers or weekday chatter. Jack followed in a smaller car, trunk full of rebar and something wrapped in an old quilt. They stepped out without speaking. Tom stretched his back, then walked the length of the field, planting small garden flags at careful intervals. Red, white, and blue. A quiet claim, not a fence, not a sign, just a suggestion that this space now answered to something different. A teenager biked by on the far sidewalk, slowing to stare. That's a huge smoker, the boy shouted. Tom looked up from unloading bricks. It's a tribute, he said. Jack handed him a short level and eyed the layout. You really think they'll stay quiet? They have no deed, Tom replied. I have one. The grill base went in slow. First, a square of concrete poured by hand, mixed in a plastic bin near the rear bumper. They used shovels and a wheelbarrow. No cement truck, no crew. Just father and son, sweating in the rising heat. Lucille Parker appeared mid-morning with 2 bottles of lemonade in a handled basket. She didn't speak when she arrived. Just set the drinks on a folding chair, pulled up another, and sat beneath the nearest crabapple tree. She watched like someone attending a service. At noon, Nancy Bell drove up in her powder blue sedan. She stepped out with a folder and the same leather handbag she'd carried for 20 years. You're now the proud owner of Civic Green, she said. No liens, no clauses, no conditions. Tom wiped his hands on a towel and nodded. He didn't reach for the folder. Instead, he gestured to a spot near the smoker base. Want to put it under the stone? Nancy smiled faintly. Maybe frame it first. He accepted the folder, tucked it in the glove box of the pickup, beside old gas receipts and a crumpled county fair map. Jack crouched beside the frame they were welding. The rebar formed a low arch meant to hold the first grill plate, custom fit to match the old smoker Tom once kept in the shed. He'd drawn it from memory on a napkin the night before. Brian Krause passed by just after lunch. He wore a town maintenance vest, dusty from planting flowers near the library. He paused at the edge of the sidewalk, took in the bricks, the welding gear, the flags. He didn't wave. Didn't smile. Just stood there. Tom caught his gaze, nodded once. Brian nodded back, and walked on. They broke for a moment. Jack opened the truck and pulled out a pair of bottled waters. As he did, something slipped from the glove box, a photo, curled at the edges, faded but intact. He picked it up, brushing away the dust. It showed Tom and Ellen standing beside the old barrel smoker, Ellen's arm hooked around his, both smiling under a string of paper lanterns. The handwriting on the back read, 88, Civic Cookout, 43 neighbors, 1 bee sting. Jack slid the photo into his wallet. By late afternoon, the smoker base was set, the bricks surrounding it were dry, and the grate was welded tight. Tom knelt beside a small wooden placard and nailed it into a pine post with 3 slow strikes. In memory of cookouts past, and those to come. He stepped back, satisfied. The wind picked up slightly, carrying the scent of clover and hickory with it. When they returned to the truck, a single sheet of paper fluttered beneath the wiper blade. Jack plucked it off, read the bolded letters, unauthorized structure, subject to review. Tom took it, folded it into thirds, and slid it into his shirt pocket. Then he picked up the welding torch and struck the arc again. Beverly watches from across the street, gripping a clipboard, but takes no step forward. 2 days after Tom's grill monument began taking shape, the HOA posted a notice on a wooden stake, pending review for removal. They drove it into the earth early, just after sunrise, before the real heat settled in. The sign was laminated, printed in crisp black font, and planted like a flag at the edge of the newly laid stones. Beverly stood behind it, clipboard in one hand, sunglasses low on her nose. Across the street, Frank Delgado leaned against the hood of his truck, arms folded. "They forgot this town's got a long memory, and longer weekends," he muttered. Tom didn't say a word. He merely eyed the sign, then returned to adjusting the grill plate with a small wrench. Jack stood beside him, holding a socket set, jaw tight but quiet. Behind them, the scent of hickory lingered faintly from yesterday's test burn. By 10, Beverly was gone. The sign remained, until around noon, when two older men from the VFW hall strolled over. One of them, wearing a faded Korean War cap, examined the post like it was a misplaced lawn dart. Without ceremony, they pulled it up and set it gently beside a recycling bin. No one said a word. No one needed to. Tom wiped his hands and finally spoke. "If it was truly unauthorized," he said evenly, "I'd have heard from the county, not a clipboard." That afternoon, Lucille Parker sat on her porch in a white wicker chair, knitting a soft blue throw blanket. The radio on the table played an Elvis tune, low and steady. Jack walked by on his way back from the diner, and she waved him over. "Iced tea?" she asked. "Sure," he said. She poured it into glass tumblers, not plastic. A sprig of mint floated lazily atop each. "Beverly," Lucille began, "used to flip burgers with Ellen back when this was just grass and ants. No signs. No bylaws. Just people." Jack glanced at the field. "She doesn't seem to remember that." Lucille gave a small smile. "Oh, she remembers. She just prefers revision." They sat in the quiet for a moment, sipping. Then Lucille said, more softly, "I was one of the original supporters. The HOA, I mean. We thought rules would make things easier. And now?" Lucille tightened her stitch, eyes on her yarn. "Now I wonder what we were trying to control." Back at the house, Nancy arrived with an envelope and her usual directness. "This," she said, placing it on Tom's kitchen counter, "is a formal request for the HOA to cease interference with private property. Cites state law, land use ordinances, and a few choice words from the county charter." Tom nodded, barely glancing at it. "You want me to hand-deliver it?" Nancy asked. He shook his head. "Mail's slower. Let them stew longer." The local radio aired a brief segment that evening, a unique grilling structure's gone up at Civic Green. No word from the HOA, but neighbors seemed curious. A few chuckled in the background as the host quipped, "Smells better than the last board meeting." That night, Brian Krause came home later than usual. He found his mother at the kitchen table, phone in one hand, the HOA bylaws in the other. "Was it really about the smoke?" he asked, not looking up. Beverly didn't answer immediately. Her pen scratched across a page. Brian set his maintenance vest on the hook and headed upstairs. Just before midnight, the community Facebook group lit up with a new post. It showed the grill monument at sunset, shadows stretching across the fresh stones, Tom standing off to the side, barely visible. The caption read, "Smoke never smelled more like justice." Within minutes, it had 30 comments. The first one read simply, "About time someone stood up to her." Beverly read the line twice. Her face didn't change, but her fingers curled slightly around the edge of the clipboard. The light from the screen flickered across her eyes. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. The silence said enough. Beverly read the comment again, "About time someone stood up to her." Beverly Krause opened the Monday newsletter, expecting silence, but instead found an open letter signed by 50 residents. The page had been folded neatly, inserted between the usual printouts of lawn watering guidelines and garbage pickup hours. But there it was, plain font, polite tone, and undeniable authority. The letter asked for transparency, outlined concerns, and ended with a unified request, a formal audit of Red Oak Hills HOA financial activity from the past 3 years. She read it twice before slipping it back into her leather binder. Her fingers paused on the edge of the paper just a beat too long. At 10 a.m., the HOA community room was fuller than usual. Folding chairs scraped across linoleum as more neighbors filtered in. A few held coffee cups, others clutched newsletters. There was no chatter. Just a waiting hush. Nancy Bell arrived in her usual blazer, her steps unhurried. She nodded at a few familiar faces and took a seat near the front. A small flash drive glinted in her palm. Frank Delgado leaned against the back wall, arms folded. Lucille Parker sat 2 rows from the front, a printed document in her lap. Brian entered quietly and stood by the sidewall, not sitting with the board this time. Beverly called the meeting to order with a tap of her pen on the podium. Her voice was clipped, forced neutral. It seems there's been some confusion regarding recent improvements to Civic Greenfield, she began. And additional concerns raised over budgeting. We'd like to clarify. A hand rose from the 3rd row. We'd like to be heard first. Beverly's jaw tightened. This is a board-led. But the woman didn't wait. She stood and began reading. We, the undersigned residents of Red Oak Hills, respectfully request an independent review of all HOA expenditures and policies enacted since January 2020. We believe accountability strengthens our community. There was no applause, but the silence was solid. Behind her, Nancy rose. I'd like to submit supporting documentation, she said, walking calmly to the front. She plugged the USB into the board's projector laptop. The first slide displayed a simple header, Signature Analysis, HOA Project Approvals. Below it were scans of forms with duplicated handwriting. These documents, Nancy said, include project proposals approved with falsified or duplicated signatures. They were submitted under board member names, some of whom, as you know, no longer live here. Gasps spread in ripples. Then Brian stepped forward. I found them, he said. They were in the digital archive. I checked after I saw my own name on one from before I was even hired. Beverly's face froze. Is this about your father? She asked him sharply. Is this some misplaced guilt? Brian didn't respond. He just stepped back into the crowd. Lucille stood next. Her voice wavered but held. This is a copy of the 2019 board meeting minutes, she said, holding a page aloft. It notes a rejection of Ellen Carson's request to host a Memorial Day cookout at Civic Green. The reasoning listed was, potential disruption to visual uniformity. She paused. Ellen had stage 2 cancer at the time. She just wanted to host one last meal. The air shifted, heavy, unblinking. Beverly snapped her folder closed. This is ridiculous. Carson has turned a grill into a weapon. You're letting emotion destroy order. Tom, who hadn't spoken all morning, looked up. Order isn't control. It's consent. The words landed like weight on water, no splash, just depth. Someone in the back stood. I move for a vote. Another followed. All in favor of requesting the current HOA board to resign pending audit review? Hands went up. Dozens. Nancy stepped forward again and laid down a manila envelope. This, she said, is the formal filing to establish Civic Green as a protected community trust, not governed by the HOA, but by the residents, jointly. Signatures attached. No one objected. Beverly didn't speak. Her hands were folded tight on her lap, white at the knuckles. Her clipboard sat untouched beside her. People filtered out slowly, murmuring, some relieved, some stunned. Tom and Jack lingered last, offering no words. There was no need. Later, after the chairs had been stacked and the lights dimmed, Beverly remained seated. No one came to speak to her. No one called her name. Not Brian. Not Lucille. Not even the quiet woman who used to bring her banana bread. She sat with perfect posture, clipboard in her lap, and nothing to record. Beverly sat alone, first time no one called her name in the room she once controlled. A folding chair creaked as Lucille stood with the ballot envelope in hand. Her voice didn't shake, because her mind didn't either. The air in the Red Oak Hills Community Hall felt heavier than usual, not from heat but from the kind of stillness people hold before something changes. Fluorescent lights flickered slightly overhead. A flag leaned off-center on its pole near the back wall, a detail no one moved to fix. Coffee brewed in a corner, the pot marked with a faded label that read "Donated by Penny's Post." It smelled slightly burnt, as if no one wanted to drink it but didn't dare turn it off. Someone stirred cream into a styrofoam cup, and the plastic spoon clicked once against the side, sharp in the silence. Tom and Jack sat in the back row. No buttons. No badges. Just watching. Lucille cleared her throat and spoke again, the envelope held delicately between her fingers. "We're here to vote," she said, "not to shout." No one clapped. They didn't need to. The motion had already passed days ago, to review, to recall, to reframe what HOA was supposed to mean. This afternoon was only the counting. Nancy stood near the folding table up front, clipboard at her side, her glasses halfway down her nose. She'd reviewed the process line by line with the remaining board members, most of whom sat with their arms crossed, saying nothing. The ballots were handwritten, names scrawled in blue ink across standard index cards. One man brought his own pen, a fountain one, and insisted on writing slowly. No one minded. People came in waves. The owner of the auto shop. The retired vet with the leg brace. The wife of the town's only vet, who brought oatmeal bars for everyone and asked if they needed more chairs. A boy no older than 12 walked his grandmother to the front, waited beside her quietly, and then walked her back again. She patted his hand but said nothing aloud. Brian Krause asked to speak. Lucille paused, looked at the crowd, and nodded. He stepped up, not behind the podium, just next to it. Hands in pockets, voice low. Control built on silence deserves neither. Then he sat back down. Beverly remained at the front. Her face calm, spine straight, but her knuckles white where they gripped the edge of her clipboard. She didn't speak. Not once. Just stared at the floor near the voting box as if it might offer reprieve. Nancy began the tally as people stood in small knots, murmuring over coffee and the occasional peanut butter cookie. A few stared at their phones, not for distraction, but in case the local radio picked up the story. When she was done, Nancy looked at Lucille and nodded once. Lucille took a breath. With 62%, she said, this community has voted to replace the current HOA board and amend policy toward open review, limited authority, and voluntary neighborhood standards. The words landed like soft but undeniable rain. No applause. Just a shared exhale. A long pause. The kind that doesn't end something but releases it. Beverly stood slowly. She did not speak. Did not make eye contact. She walked to the aisle, down past rows of people she'd once governed, past Brian who looked away, and out the double doors without a sound. No one called after her. Lucille stepped back up. "There's one more matter," she said. "Tom Carson has something to sign." Tom walked forward without fanfare. Nancy handed him a simple sheet, 1 page, notarized. The title at the top read, Civic Greenfield, Transfer to Carson Community Trust. He took the pen, wrote his name, and nodded once. There was no cheer. Just a few quiet smiles and a breath of wind through the open window. Outside, the Memorial Day flags along Main Street fluttered gently. As people filed out, some to the bakery, some to the diner, some just to walk, Jack stayed behind to stack the chairs. On his way out, he passed the maple tree near the fence. And saw Lucille standing there, tying a ribbon to a small wooden post. She stepped back to look at it, simple, carved neatly. By Sunday morning, the civic green smelled of applewood and honeysuckle. And this time, no one taped a violation notice. The grill monument stood at the center of it all, warmed gently by slow-burning wood, not for brisket today, but for cider-warmed air and light conversation. Around it, folding chairs creaked softly beneath neighbors easing into old habits. The birds had been up first, chirping into a clear June sky that didn't promise rain, just time. Tom lit the morning fire with a match from an old box Ellen had once left tucked in the back of the junk drawer. He struck it slow. On the side of the box, the words still showed through in her handwriting, "Keep warm, keep going." No one called it an event. There were no flyers. Just a known rhythm now, Sunday Smoke Social, someone had dubbed it, scribbled onto the chalkboard leaning beside the cider table. A pitcher of lemonade with actual lemons floated beside it, sweating gently under the warming sun. Lucille sat knitting, but slower than usual. Frank brought a tin of peanut brittle no one had asked for but most sampled. Nancy set a small wooden box beside the monument, "Story box," the label said. A small notepad and a stubby pen lay inside. Brian approached the table with a roll of paper under his arm. He handed it to Tom without much ceremony. "It's a start," he said. "Map of all the other shared-use parcels the HOA never had a right to claim." Tom unrolled it briefly, nodded once, and tucked it into his canvas satchel. Jack was kneeling beside the smoker base, chisel in hand. He tapped gently, brushing away dust between each letter. When he stood, the new plaque read, "Built not to defy, but to remember." People came and went. Some stayed for 10 minutes. Others brought pies and folding fans. A few new faces arrived too, quiet ones who'd once stayed back when signs went up and warnings were posted. They now offered small things, a tray of deviled eggs, a camp chair, a nod. Nobody asked permission. And no one needed to. Tom held a tin cup of coffee, standing near the edge of the shade. He watched a young couple help their daughter set up a blanket near the clover patch. The girl giggled and chased a bubble that caught the light just right before bursting midair. Beyond them, the space once threatened by rules and warnings now hummed with easy motion. Someone's radio, barely audible, played a cover of a 1950s tune slowed to half-tempo. Tom sipped quietly, eyes scanning the open field, and settled on the maple tree where Beverly's old banner once hung. It now held nothing. It didn't need to. He spoke once to no one in particular. 1984, "We had a storm that knocked out power for 3 days," he said. Still grilled. Someone brought charcoal in a wheelbarrow. Nancy, within earshot, smiled gently but said nothing. A camera clicked near the picnic table. Families posed beside the grill. No podiums. No statements. Just quiet laughter and a few thumbs up. A child leaned against the plaque, reading it out loud with effort. At the far corner, by the lemonade jar, a small boy tugged at Lucille's hem. "Is Mr. Carson the mayor now?" Lucille looked down, then smiled as she poured another cup. "No, honey. He's something better. He's a neighbor. Real monument, dedicated to good neighbors." The air over Civic Green now carried the gentle rhythm of conversation and cider, not commands and citations. What began as a quiet stand at a backyard smoker became a shared remembrance, a reminder that neighbors, when united, don't need permission to protect what's theirs. Rules are meant to guide, not to silence, and when they're bent by the few, it takes the courage of the many to set them straight. Like the slow curl of applewood smoke on a summer morning, the best change rises steady, rooted in care, not noise.